Jillian, thank you
Yes.
so much for taking the time to meet with the Casper Star-Tribune editorial board today.
Thank you for having me.
We will get right to it, and I guess we'll start here.
Great.
How would you characterize the job that Cindy Hill has done with the Department of Education?
Right. That's a great question, and I'm a little bit uncomfortable characterizing her performance in particular. However, that is not to say that I don't have some concerns about lack of leadership and lack of administrative ability that has occurred over the last 4 years. That is one reason that I'm running for the office. I would hope that any candidate running for office wants to see change in a positive direction, and that is certainly what I'm hoping for. There has been a lack of performance in the department, and while it can't be laid squarely on one person's shoulder, there is a great deal of, again, lack of leadership and mismanagement that has taken place.
So, let's say you're elected.
Mm-hmm.
Probably one of the first things you want to do is heal the department.
Absolutely.
As superintendent, how would you do that? Do you start with cohesion, attitude, outlook? Where do you go? Where do you start?
Well, I think the superintendent has not the luxury of any kind of learning curve at all. Day one, they need to set out to accomplish two things. What I will do is I will keep education moving forward and heal a pretty broken system. That comes twofold, happening at the same time, and this is how I would do that. Number one, there's a great deal of talent currently at the Department of Education, and that needs to be tapped into. Those folks need to be empowered. There are also a number of vacancies due to mass exodus. There's a lack of loyalty. There's a certain degree of the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing, or the right hand being scared to do what they're supposed to do as the right hand. And so I really want to work on healing that and making sure that we have stable, predictable leadership at the state level. The other side of the coin is keeping education moving forward. That is done largely through collaboration, consultation, and coordination with local school districts, local boards, the state board of education, the legislature, and a number of education partners. Luckily, I am going into this position with a great amount of historical knowledge, both about education and the Department of Education, as well as successful experience as a leader in state government. So I can do both of those things. I've led in challenging times. I actually manage a staff larger than what I will have at the Department of Education, and oversee a budget of approximately $10 million a month. And so we'll approach that reorganization, that healing, much the same way as I've approached it as a state government leader and an education leader.
Talk about that experience a little bit for you personally. What
Great.
experience and familiarity do you have with running a large organization with a multi-million-dollar budget?
Great. I'll back up just a little further and note that I was a teacher for 10 years. I taught in Wyoming classrooms, graduate of the University of Wyoming. I have a master's degree in education. I chose to go to state government about 8 years ago, where I have been working in several different capacities. At the Department of Education, I led and supervised efforts in coordination with school districts on school improvement and literacy improvement. Again, built the credibility with districts, did not have the budget at that point. From the Department of Education, I moved over to the governor's office, where I was the policy advisor for a number of different issues, but primarily local governments. So I worked, again, shoulder to shoulder with the legislature, with communities across Wyoming, mayors, council folks, county commissioners. I was a liaison on the SLIB board and land commissioner or land board and SBC. And then from the governor's office, I moved into a role at the Department of Family Services, which is where I am currently. I'm an administrator. I oversee a staff of approximately 200 across the state, including here in Casper, and oversee a budget of approximately $10 million a month. When I took over the position, I didn't have quite as many folks or as much responsibility. We turned a budget overage, a multi-million-dollar budget overage, into the green within a little over a year. With success comes more responsibility, unfortunately. So I took on a couple of other programs and several dozen more staff. We just recently received an award for being the most improved state in the nation for improving our efficiencies and air rates. Those all translate into money, taxpayer money saved, and a more effective and efficient government that works better for people.
Why did you leave the Department of Education?
I left the Department of Education in 2011, and I left primarily because I had an opportunity to serve in the governor's office. That is a great honor. I knew that to round myself as a state government leader and as a leader in Wyoming, that I needed to move away from education, not necessarily to see what was wrong with it, but to also just grasp the underpinnings of other facets of state government as well, and I'm really grateful that I did. It showed me I have a great deal of wisdom around how our state government works and around multiple agencies, not just education.
Backing up a little bit further, talk about your traditional classroom experience that you have had. How would that impact the job that you do as superintendent?
Great. So I'm a graduate of Wyoming schools. I'm a graduate of Campbell County High School. I taught for 10 years. 8 of those years were in Hewlett, one of our smaller districts, and 2 of those years were in Gillette, and one of our larger districts in the state. So I do have a vast experience in terms of communities, the size of communities that I've taught in. And wherever I've been, I've worked on the same things that I'm really working on as a leader. I've involved parents and families in decision making. I know that that's what makes successful students. I have worked on school improvement efforts, volunteered for just about everything at the classroom, school, and community level that I knew would positively impact kids. That said, that's a good teacher leader. There's a difference between being a good teacher leader and being a good administrator. So not only will I take my teacher leadership experience with me, but I'll take my managerial skills, which have been successful, as well as my government leadership skills, which again have been successful. And when I say successful, I mean recorded success in saving money, saving taxpayer money, and making government work better.
What would be the biggest shift for the Department of Education under your leadership?
You know, I definitely see that there is a need for steadfast, stable leadership. I believe that the biggest shift for me will be that I see myself as an advocate for education, not an adversary. I think that what has happened in Wyoming education at this point is that most of the time it's more about winning than it is about doing the right thing for kids. I want to make sure that we're doing the right thing for kids, and that when we look on the front page of the paper, we're reading about education successes or education challenges, not political wins and losses. That's one shift. I think that the role of the State Department of Education should be very small, and it should really set the stage for local school districts and communities to thrive. So the Department of Education needs to assure that leadership is steadfast, collaborative, in partnership and conjunction with a number of entities and local and state partners, as well as a stable funding stream, assistance, convening, being an advocate, the chief advocate for education, convening the right partners at the right times, and working with folks and not against folks.
You spoke a little bit ago about not necessarily getting a win, but doing the right things
Yes.
for the kids.
Mhm.
Can you name one specific program or policy that you would change or improve right away to kind of get to that? Is there an opportunity that we're missing out on specifically right now?
Well, I think the key to that is really taking a look at local control as being the mechanism for school success. We have a number of school districts, including Casper, Natrona County, that have undertaken reforms and been very successful. I would like to see the state superintendent and the Department of Education create opportunities for those best practices to be shared statewide so that other school districts who might want to undertake those programs as well have not only the connection but the support from the state level to be able to be successful with reforms of their choice. So one shift that you will see with me, and perhaps the main shift, is again that collaboration with local school districts and partners in education to make sure that school districts are successful and that we are not pushing an agenda per se.
Next generation science standards. Kind of talk about your take on the legislature's decision and where you fall in there.
Great. So, of course, this is a discussion that many of us have been following all along. As an educator, I am for high standards. We know that high standards are what keep our students successful in school and in life. And as a leader, it's really important to recognize, especially as a Wyoming leader, that we do have unique needs as a state. What I have heard as a leader and as an educator over the last year or so, since we've been discussing science standards, is everything that's wrong. There's a lot of convolution and I'm afraid confusion around the difference between standards, curriculum, teaching materials, poor teaching versus strong teaching, balanced teaching, etc. So we need to make sure that we lay all of those cards on the table. What I'm more interested in doing is focusing on solutions. Since I have been in this race and declared candidacy, been thinking about it for several years, declared candidacy about 6 months ago, I've been reaching out to a number of partners in the state, including in the energy industry, the agricultural industry, geology, local government resources as well, and started talking about what would make Wyoming standards, because that's what you always hear, right? We want Wyoming standards. So what do Wyoming science standards look like? We have a number of unique topics that make Wyoming, and their science topics. So what I would like to do is make sure that we have some of those unique partners around the policy table and around the standards review process, helping to make some of those decisions about what makes Wyoming standards. As a Campbell County graduate, I didn't go to visit a coal mine until I was out of high school. And to me, as a Wyomingite, visiting a coal mine should be akin to visiting our state capitol. Visiting an oil rig should be akin to that as well. And it's not something that we should learn about once, but that should be a part of our children's upbringing, our students' upbringing, so that we have a workforce that's prepared, if not in trait and training, at least in knowledge, to fill our workforce in Wyoming upon graduation, either from high school or from higher education. I think that's really important. The other piece that I see that's been missing in the standards review process, including the science standards, is that there are many voices who were not heard in the standards review process under the current administration. We need to make sure that we do a better job, and my plan for doing that is to have the Department of Education, facilitated by me as superintendent, go into communities, partner with school districts, and conduct focus groups on standards, including science standards and others as well. But make sure that we have a representative look at what Wyoming wants to see in or not see in science standards, and those should be the centerpiece of the conversation. Asking 300 people or putting a call to action out to say whoever wants to be part of this review process is probably not the best way to go about it, but we do need to make sure that we have representation from communities, from local districts, so that we know what the science standards need to encompass.
Schools on the reservation, it's been said that they're failing. What do you do to turn the relationships around and the performance around? How do you have the Department of Education work with the tribes closer? How would you handle that?
Great question. Such an important topic. And when my babies were little, I consulted, thinking that would allow me more flexibility. I consulted on education issues, and pretty soon I was consulting on 4 different reservations across the nation on literacy and school improvement efforts. So I understand the issues and the challenges on the reservation, and I think that the only way to do it is by empowering the children, families, and educators that are on the district through who are on the reservation, through steadfast leadership, through articulated outcomes at the state level that are agreed upon with the reservation schools, and so that we're all moving toward the same goal and we have the same targets to hit, and we have a collective responsibility to reach those. That sounds like it's really easy. It's not. It takes a lot of time, a lot of hard work, and a lot of buy-in that takes place over time.
Kind of wrapping things up here, 4 candidates for the job.
Yes.
How do you differentiate yourself from the other 3?
Great question. I do have unique qualifications in that I've been a successful government leader. The only time that I've spent away from Wyoming in nearly 44 years is working in D.C. for Craig Thomas. And, waking up and working in D.C. alongside Senator Thomas is a little bit like waking up and going to work in Wyoming anyway. But that's the only time I've spent away from Wyoming. So I understand Wyoming. I'm a 5th-generation Wyomingite. I understand from my experience in D.C. that state government is far superior to federal government. I will bring that experience, that knowledge, and that leadership to the office. I also have 10 years of teaching experience and understand that system as well. I have the credibility and the ability to positively impact education for years to come. I'm interested in impacting the office of the superintendent in the education system, not for myself, but for my children, for my children's children, and so forth. I'm really interested in making Wyoming a better place, and I'm interested in keeping more kids in Wyoming to work and thrive as I have chosen to do as a Wyoming native. Finally, I have been able to work with SLIB, Land Board, and SBC as a liaison, and I understand that process. I understand how important the connection is between the 5 elected officials and the local communities, local governments, and the impact and authority that they have sitting on those very important boards. There's not another candidate who brings that knowledge to the table. And again, I don't believe that in this office in particular, we have the luxury of electing anyone who has a learning curve. We need to elect a conservative who has a proven record of leadership and success and has the knowledge to start day one, hit the ground running, and make important decisions that are the best for our kids and keep Wyoming moving in a forward direction.
Dave, okay. Is there anything you'd like to say in closing? Anything to the people of Wyoming who will be voting on August 19th in the primary?
Goodness, one thing that that I've heard a lot on the campaign trail is that folks are really watching this race closely. They want to make sure that they make a good decision. And so I would thank the Casper Star-Tribune and other media outlets for giving candidates and citizens this important opportunity to learn and also to talk about what we bring to the office. I know all of us are working incredibly hard as candidates right now to garner votes, and I encourage folks to continue asking questions, and of course would be remiss if I didn't ask for support on August 19th.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck.
Thank you.